Hello and welcome to the Open Book channel. My name is Oli Ander, your designated open book, and this is where I share my journey as an author, talk about the craft of writing, the business of being a content creator, and occasionally review really good books. Seeing as the end of the year is usually filled with more social interactions than any other time of the year, although I normally talk about my funny little thoughts or dissections on the conversations I have on my other channels, I still thought that I'd talk a little bit on here about just how awkward it is being a writer, specifically explaining that to other people. Hopefully, you can relate. I have two kind of funny anecdotes. They're both conversations I had with people about being a writer while at a holiday gathering, where those I'm talking to are total strangers to me as a person and to the publishing industry in general. Since I was feeling a little more confident about what I'd accomplished this year, I tried to introduce what I do with specifics. I told people I mostly provide freelance editing services for other authors and write articles myself. That was a mistake. What I quickly came to realize was that the mention of doing different things within the same general field, well, the nuance doesn't register because they're not familiar with the field. I thought saying that I edit and I write articles was pretty solidly different. I certainly wasn't going around expecting people to know the difference between what someone does as a copy editor versus a developmental editor, you know? But the two immediately got conglomerated into people asking what kind of articles I edit, which is not what I do. And the process of backtracking and reestablishing their different jobs just so I could actually genuinely engage with their questions got me all fumbled up on words and anxious. I think that this is probably a pretty common experience for any small business owner, freelancer, or content creator, especially talking to someone of an older generation. Which isn't ageist to say, because the types of work, like the ways a lot of people structure their income nowadays, didn't exist a decade ago. Passive income to older generations only ever meant investments or stocks. Now it can be anything from an online store to selling books, merch, AdSense, getting sponsors from influencing. And unless you're looking into it or involved with a certain niche of content creation, why would you know exactly what goes into it? I think that everyone is pretty familiar with self publishing overtaking the publishing industry, but even those who are avid readers, if you're only ever just buying the books and not writing them yourself, there's no concept of the work behind managing draft edits, hiring designers, or being one's own marketing team, all on top of actually writing the book, that is. And that's fine. I'm not saying that everyone should know the intricacies of a business that they aren't a part of. I'm just saying it makes for a lot of awkwardness when you can't properly answer a nice question someone asks you about your work without needing to give further context. I guess it would kind of be like somebody asking, how much money do you make every time that you post a YouTube video, assuming that you're getting money from the act of posting and not from a system of AdSense or sponsors that go into the video and are completely unrelated, but is the bulk of the income, if that makes sense. I think these sorts of introductions will be easier as time goes on. It's a lot more common for young people nowadays to have a short list of things that they do in their bio, including their multiple income streams or side hustles. None of us are under the expectation that our work is only one thing, because we're not living in a world that can make ends meet anymore unless you are in a secure career 9 to 5, which are becoming much scarcer. After getting over the hurdle of separating editing and writing as separate gigs, there was then also floundering to contextualize what I do against whatever assumptions there were about what it means to write an article to them. Which, as stressful as it was that I don't make myself sound stupid or pretentious, was really interesting. Because, obviously, who I was talking to weren't the demographic of the articles that I'm writing. So, saying that I write about writing for a writing app company was just a no man's land of questions about what does that mean? I didn't even bring up that I do cover design work, what I have available to read of my own writing, or what I'm working on in my personal writing. It was for the best, because then not only would my related YouTube channels maybe get slipped out, I know I couldn't begin to explain that I write under a pen name, multiple pen names, or why. Being a freelancer in a creative field is so many little things. I'm considering for the next event that I go to where people will ask me about myself that I just bring a couple resumes. Not like the kind that you'd actually give to a job application, but all the places that you can find what I do and how I do it. I know that would be a little weird of me, but it still seems a bit easier than what I went through last time, so unprepared. The second really awkward conversation I had talking about being a writer was, well, technically it was also a context issue, but in the opposite vein. I just stuck to mentioning that I did freelance editing, and the guy hit me with a question of whether I knew another person in the publishing industry, another editor. He said their name, and they're American, and told me they're a real editor. Not in those words, like, not in a mean way. He just meant that this editor was genuinely employed under a publishing house, like it is their 9 to 5 career. When I shook my head, sheepishly admitting that I'd never heard of them, the guy seemed genuinely surprised. It's a big publishing house, and saying that I should contact him. This was a perfectly innocent conversation. I didn't take anything away from it negatively, but I did find it pretty weird. It's not just that the person I'm talking with has no concept of how large the publishing industry is. Like, even if his friend of theirs was employed by a big 5 publisher, why on earth would I know the names of everyone that works there? Especially in America, but also in general. They have hundreds of unseen employees behind every book release, and I don't even know every book release. And I'm not going to comment on the naivety that vaguely having a connection to this person I'm having a conversation with, who has a connection to this random editor in America, would magically gain me some social leverage in the industry. What I found weird is that, I don't know, do you think anyone would suggest that sort of thing if I were in another field? Like, even if I were a doctor, a surgeon, would it be surprising that I didn't know the name of another surgeon in a hospital that I've never been to? I wouldn't expect any one teacher to know the name of another, even within the same school district. A more relevant line of questioning would be to point out that we all know Stephen King, but do you know the head editor on any given manuscript of his? No? Exactly. Why would you? I guess this also boils down to a disconnect with how scattered and varying things are nowadays. The guy I was talking with's reactions make sense if he's still living in the mindset that majority of publishing happens traditionally and all of that's connected and goes through process. He must have no idea how many hundreds of thousands of books get indie published or the services that individuals can offer who aren't employed under any of those houses. Like I said, we don't all have to know everything about work that we don't do. I just had a hard time navigating the conversation knowing that if that's the assumption that they have about publishing, in a way, I assume that made me inherently look like a noob, or worse at what I do. Back in the day, in certain fields, more like physics, for example, if a physicist didn't know the name of other leading physicists, then they must be a pretty bad one who doesn't take their work seriously. And in that sense, me not knowing a random editor who this guy perceives as important may kind of illegitimize me. As much as I'm sure I'm overthinking things, I absolutely am. I'm so anxious. I thought that it would be interesting to bring up those conversations because they really highlighted the shift that we've gone through, both in a society as a whole, with how younger generations' work lives and incomes are structured so differently that those who have been in lifelong careers can't offer applicable questions anymore, but also the publishing industry specifically. I know the average person doesn't read a whole lot. Even those who are avid readers but don't intend to publish themselves don't have much incentive to learn about the back end of how different forms of publishing work. It's just kind of crazy interacting with that old paradigm, thinking that the publishing industry is small, traditional, full of connections, that being a writer has some allusion to being a novelist or journalist, under contract with steady work, when the reality is that we're all juggling several incomes in sometimes wildly different departments of the industry who have no idea who anyone else is because the world is flooded with creatives. Which is great, but it's also just not what it used to be. I hope these anecdotes were interesting to hear, maybe relatable, hopefully not triggering. Let me know in the comments what awkward conversations you've had with strangers about your writing, or whatever other creative things that you do for a living. If you cringe with me, I'll cringe with you. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you'd like to support me or this channel, there's links to my socials in the description below. Until next time, bye.